And welcome you all to the first of quite a few, I assume, joint webinars between LandApp and our partners at WildEast. Today we're going to be talking about our new algorithm called WildEdges, where we're going to be hopefully enhancing as much as possible edge habitat across the farmland of both east of England and wider across the country. Before we get into the detail of the hows and the whys, just a bit of housekeeping. So as per usual, this is a webinar, so your camera will remain off, but also we do want you to be involved in the conversation. So the Q&A function and the chat function is there as well. So if you do want to say anything to any of the other attendees, please do use that chat function, and there will be a bit of time at the end to go through the Q&As. The session will be recorded. So if you miss anything or want to revisit, if you need to leave early, don't worry about it. Tom will be fleshing out and uploading it to YouTube either later this week or early next. At the end, as usual, during these lunchtime sessions, there will be a bit of a feedback questionnaire that happens as you leave the Zoom. It only takes a couple of seconds to do, so please do answer those questions. They just help steer our both software development, but also future communications that we may have through webinars, etc. So really, without further ado, I'm just going to dive into the content, and then introduce our guest speaker, who's Hugh. So he'll be talking a bit about WildEast, what it is as an organization, where it's come from, but also the vision they have for the future. And then we're going to be running through about pledging your plans. So as we do the demonstration, what we want to encourage people is not only to look at themselves in isolation about how they can improve their own connectivity, but also looking at that future vision about how we can have a more connected landscape and how tools like the LandApp can underpin that. I'll give a live demo, a bit of an understanding of how the LandApp can be used right now by everyone on the call. And also going to, during that demo, dive into a bit of the ecological benefit that these edges bring. So I'd like to introduce Hugh, the co-founder of WildEast, from Somerleyton, and yeah, a pleasure working with you over the last couple of months, Hugh. And I'd love to hear a bit more about your vision and where you're heading in the future.
Well, thanks so much, Dan. As always, a pleasure to be working with you guys, and hello to everybody on the call. Hopefully it includes some of my WildEast co-founders and colleagues. But just quickly, for those who don't know, WildEast is a foundation, charitable foundation, nearly 2 years old now, and essentially it was born out of three sort of eco-anxious middle-aged farmers, of which I'm one. Ollie Burbeck and Argus Hardy, the other two. And I think we've all been on our farms for a while, doing various environmental practices to very different degrees. But I think we kind of woke up, as a lot of us have actually in the last few years in particular, with actually this isn't going to work unless we act on a societal level, but also on an audacious scale. And we consulted with quite a few of the kind of heroes that we have, whether that be Yellowstone or Carpathia in Romania, but also the Dutch across the way at Oostvaarderblazen and various others. And actually scale was, we were given a lot of thumbs up about being kind of audacious. Scale's investable as the new financial instruments of carbon and biodiversity offsetting come down the track. It's exciting to inspire societal change, particularly among the young and the urban. And actually, probably more importantly, both of those, it's actually the nature need. It's why we failed. We've failed not because of a lack of effort and money spent on the conservation, but of the lack of scale and crucially joined up landscape. So that was kind of how it started, and in a sense so for those of you may have seen a bit of it in the press, we again quite audaciously and absolutely romantically poured over old maps and came up with this 20% figure, as in 20% is the nature need in our hardworking sort of human landscapes, and of course most of those are farms, but actually golf courses, school playing fields, church yards, backyards, schoolyards. So hence the signposting to societal movement. And actually, if a farmer with a few hundred acres has his 20% is by volume a bigger contribution, but by number 500 people in Lowestoft is actually equally valuable to the movement. So we're into acres and participation really. And just to quickly talk on that, is that the 20%, we have to say, and it's important, it was we romantically kind of made up, dreamt up, but it is actually scientifically backed by Cambridge University, but a global scientific community that have been studying for some time the nature need in our hardworking landscapes, and the minimum threshold is 20%. So it is really important that as we move towards more regenerative farming and other green parts to our economy, that we don't lose sight of the fact that we still need to give or recreate 20%, and we're way off that target now. So that's and we express that, you know, witness statement in the words of Sir David Attenborough, or on what we call the map of dreams, which is a bit of tech that we've been working on. But it allows anyone, whether it's a window box, a backyard, a schoolyard, a farm, a big farm, a small farm, to just simply register and through that inspire societal change. So we need mass participation. We are absolutely not here to tell or recommend or advise people what to do, far from it. We are looking for best in class for those of you who are already doing whatever they're doing in their farms and gardens and everywhere else, to help signpost to a better future. So it's really that we're making noise rather than instructive. And it's just important, because I know a lot of farmers have perhaps thought we are here to try and tell them. So that's probably enough on intro, Dan. Did you want me to move on to the background of WildEdges now? Yeah, so thank you for sharing that screen. So this is on our website for those of you who haven't been on, and actually it could be anywhere. It is actually just around the corner from me, Bungay in the Saints. So hopefully it's not one of you listening's field. But the point really is, rewilding, you know, we're very clear that we're not. WildEast was you know, a brand. It wasn't. We were very specifically not rewilding, and we absolutely understand that whilst it fits some places, to a very large extent, it doesn't fit in East Anglia, which is a critical food producing region. But we still need to shoehorn more space for nature into our landscapes. We have about a 60,000 kilometre network of hedges, but to a large extent very depleted, and not in a sort of life-giving condition. And so we were looking for a kind of farmer-friendly option, and WildEdges it's really simple. We just looked at what if every farmer, and forget the size of the farm and the field, because they're of course all different, but taking some averages. Yeah, thanks, Dan. This is just sliding back to how this landscape looked before the hedges were removed. Now we can't go back there because of big arable tech, but what we worked out, and very gratefully Land App have made this much more you know, technical and accurate, but we'd had a rough stab at, if everyone gave 10 meters, you know, field crop to crop, and allowed WildEdges to scrub out, that we would give 5% of that 20%, that magic number, back to nature. So we'd have these great corridors, or cathedrals, if you like, of biodiversity pulsating through our countryside. And the fantastic thing is that they're pre-existing. It's a pre-existing network that we've perhaps overlooked. So, but also looking at farming and the farmer friendliness, and we do it here, and I know a lot of you already do it. It particularly with input costs as they are, it helps save time, save money, save carbon, save nature. So it's a kind of win-win-win-win really for farmers, for biodiversity, for carbon. So WildEdges was born, and it's something that what we weren't able to do is to present it in a format that was usable and helpful to farmers, because that's not our skill. And I'm delighted that over the last year and a bit, really, we've been working with Land App on different things, but they've, you know, they've helped us make that something that we really believe now is highly digestible and really investable and exciting. And you know, it is important. We have to crystal ball, but what an amazing achievement it would be for the East. And WildEast is all about regional pride, being the first. We're already the primary farming nation, but let's be the most bio-restored, region ahead of all the other regions, even though we're the most heavily farmed. And this, if we all act together, would be a huge step to achieving that. Thanks. I think that's enough from me, Dan. thank you very much, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Hugh. And yeah, it's been a real privilege working with you and all your enthusiastic team around, this future vision. And I think in the current climate, what everyone needs to be able to do is understand what role do they play. And you mentioned it there, it doesn't matter if you've just got a window box or a small garden or, a 100-acre farm or a 10,000-hectare farm. Everyone has a role to play in this movement, and we're really excited to be able to support you both in the technical elements, but also helping make that revision a reality and the delivery elements as well. So what I want to do is just spend just 5 minutes talking through the specifics of a WildEdge. What does it actually look like on the ground? What are the benefits it brings? And what are we really trying to promote? And, Hugh's touched on it there, really eloquently, which was we're trying to promote as much as possible the edge habitat of every agricultural field to be dedicated a little bit more to nature. So, embracing the mess around the outside of a field, allowing those corridors to connect existing features, woodland to woodland or, woodland to wetlands, etc., without, fundamentally sacrificing the food production that we so heavily rely on, especially in these times. So what is a WildEdge? WildEdge is just a habitat consisting of hedgerow scrub, and Hugh mentioned 10 meters there. That can vary between 6 and 12 meters, but we want to encourage as much as possible natural regeneration of existing hedge lines to a width that's wider than existing. So aiming for 10. I'm not sure if any of you have been to, any of these farms that allow these hedges to get wide, but they are magnificent, almost cathedrals, I think is the word that Argus from WildEast uses. So encouraging scrub, and that edge habitat obviously is providing berries and pollen, etc. But then next to that hedge, there's got to be some transitional habitat between the hedge and the actual crop or the grassland. And so what we are trying to promote is that there are arable margins next to arable fields. So that's your tussocky grasses or your wildflower banks. And if you're in grassland, you want to promote as much as possible those tussocky areas, regions of the field that potentially the grazing cattle can't reach or that the hay isn't taken from. And that transitional habitat just provides even more diversity for a wider range of species, and it allows a wider range of species to migrate through the landscape. And I think current conservation, one of their main flaws, well, traditional conservation, I should say, is that they're isolated pockets. A local nature reserve is only as good as the species that can move to and from it. And what we're really trying to promote is, we need these big sites for whether it's traditional conservation or rewilding. However, they're never going to be as good as unless you connect them up with each other. And therefore, farmland far and wide has a massive role to play. Just talking through some of the benefits that they have. Obviously, I've mentioned habitat there, so different species of invertebrates and mammals, but it's that food supply that it provides, as well as the the overwintering, nesting habitats, etc. Very appropriately at the moment, I think the flood holding capacity that these edges could provide could potentially be the main avenue that we explore for funding edges. We're not really going to talk about funding edges during this, even though it's definitely an ambition. We will touch on some stewardship options that help towards the end of the webinar. But just putting a wider edge, potentially on a flow pathway or near a watercourse, will naturally hold some of that water back and reduce the amount of water that reaches the river. Other one that's apt at the moment is carbon capture. So we are looking at quantifying the amount of carbon that these edges sequester. We've got some data from Natural England and some other sources. However, each edge varies. It's a 3-dimensional beast that takes a lot more than just having a 2-dimensional figure attached to it. And then finally, increasing connectivity. Not going to touch too much on this, but we're also looking at quantifying how much connectivity is improved by instating a WildEdge. And that is just how easy can any species get from point A to point B in the landscape, or point A to point B within the farm. So with all this in mind, and I appreciate this is still quite hypothetical and romantic, as Hugh says, what we're trying to do at the Land App is bring that theory, those ideas, to a practical tool that you can use on the software. So what we've done is we've teamed up with WildEast, we've got some data scientists, and we've created an algorithm. So now any farm in England can come onto the Land App for free and see what their WildEdge habitat could look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate exactly how you can do that now, give you a bit of a walkthrough of how you can activate it, and hopefully encourage you to get to that point where you're happy enough with your WildEdges that you would like to pledge them to the WildEast map of dreams that Hugh mentioned during his intro. So the first place that we start is the Land App website. And you may have noticed that we've had this product update banner happening on the top of the screen. And within that banner, there is some guidance that you can access by clicking this hyperlink in here. And it's that guidance that I'm going to be talking through now. So if you want to just have a quick recap on what I've said today, come and just click that guidance document and it will show you step by step what happens. As for any demo on the Land App, everything starts with you logging in and coming onto your maps dashboard and creating a new map. Demo WildEdges. Oh, I've misspelled edges. I do apologize, Hugh. I'm going to have to change that, otherwise that's going to annoy me. Demo WildEdges. By creating that map, you're then into the Land App on an interactive base map where you can start to build your picture. And as a note, you can actually add these WildEdges onto existing maps. You don't have to do it on a new map. All the workflows, as per usual, begin with creating a boundary. And because this at the moment is specific to England and English farms, we recommend that everyone just imports their SBI number from the Rural Payment Agency, just to get that initial boundary for where this habitat's happening. So I've downloaded the land cover, and actually I might download the hedgerows because they'll be relevant for explaining where the edges come from. So I've downloaded my farm outline directly from the Rural Payment Agency using the import from Rural Payment Agency button. And I'm actually going to do all this demo on satellite imagery because I think that's a bit more exciting. And so at the moment, for this holding in particular, it's up in the Surrey Hills, mainly grassland. There's a couple of arable fields. But what we really want to do, even though this is fairly connected compared to some of the farms that Hugh was mentioning earlier, we want to see where's best to improve that edge habitat, widening existing ones or connecting up non-existent ones. The first part of the workflow is that we really do encourage everyone just to create an ownership boundary, and that's just a single polygon that outlines everything that's under your ownership. And the quickest way you can do that is you can actually just duplicate your land parcels by clicking the three dots and hitting duplicate into an ownership boundary, ownership, like so. And what that does is that's now created this red outline, and then you can right click and select all your polygons like so and merge them together. And what that's done now is that's just created a single polygon, which is, I can color it in red, for example, or maybe I might just put a red border around it. And that's kind of the focus area. And just as a note, we've, with these little, what do we call them? Legacy nodes, you've got these little lines, you can actually tidy those up pretty quickly by drawing an area over the top of them. And this is not me getting too distracted, but I just wanted to make it look tidy. Drawing a quick area over them like so, subtracting that area. So that's just, hole punching the area from one and then just merging them back together. And we've got some guidance on that, but just to show you that now I've got a bit of a cleaner boundary if anyone has any of those that they want to overcome. So this is my target area. And now I'm really ready to run my WildEdge algorithm. That's all I really needed. We just needed to get a focus area for where we actually want those WildEdges to go. So the first step is you come up to this button at the top right. It's called Buy Data. Might be a bit misleading. We're thinking about renaming it, but there are some data sets such as WildEdges that are free. So even though it says Buy Data, that's kind of just within our shop window, we call it. You see it on the left-hand side. Once you click on the WildEdges, you're met with this left-hand form. And this allows you to define your purchase area or define the area you want to run at WildEdge, and also just fill out a couple of details that the algorithm needs before it can run. So the first thing you do is you define that purchase area. And then the first thing I'm going to demo is actually, I'm just going to create a frame and run my WildEdge for everything like so. So I want everything contained within my SBI number, within my ownership boundary to create a WildEdge. I'm going to just call this one demo 1 and paste in my SBI number. And that's all the information we need. So the only reason we need an SBI number is we're not going to store it or move it anywhere else. That SBI number is the unique number that accesses that data from the Rural Payment Agency. And it's that data that runs through the algorithm that allows us to project or display a WildEdge. Once I hit Buy Now, what happens is the Land App then sends a quick request to the RPA. So this is going to access live data from the Rural Payment Agency. It brings your field parcels, like you can see on the map, through our algorithm. And on the way, it does a couple of things. It detects where existing hedgerows are. It detects where existing watercourses are, and it then suggests where you should be buffering both of those two things. So if I refresh my page, what I've got is I've got now two data layers on the left-hand side. One of them is called LMP WildEdges, LMP standing for Land Management Plan. And you can see it's been given the name Demo 1 because that's what I added. And so what it's done is it's now created a project on the Land app, but that project has got some features associated with it. So instead of it just returning the RPA's field parcel data without edges, it's added a buffer to every existing hedgerow that's found on this farm. So down this stretch, for example, the algorithm has detected that there's a hedgerow there, and it's said to widen that hedge by 6 meters, and then add a buffer of another 3 meters. So you can see that just this one hedgerow, which on the satellite is relatively thin, a meter or two. What we're really trying to promote is that meter or two to turn into that 10 to 12 meter corridor. Okay. A couple of rules that happen on the way is that we won't put the wild edge where it's not relevant. So there's a couple of things that exclude wild edges from being created. The first one is, ineligible land. So it will only put the wild edge on existing arable or existing grassland features. It won't say, for example, put a wild edge on a road or a track or a woodland. There's just a couple of business rules that we've applied to it. And secondly, it will only put buffers to existing hedgerows if the RPA know where those existing hedgerows are. So one of the main comments we've had early on is actually that the RPA's hedgerow data isn't correct, which may be the case, and therefore actually some of the data that you get returned isn't going to be a true representation of every wild edge you can create, and that's just a limitation of exactly the data that we've got access to. But you can see for this one farm, we're suggesting that there's a widening of a number of areas of hedgerows that could happen, but there's also a lot of gaps where potentially, down here, other things could happen as well. So what I would encourage at the first instant is just type in the SBI number and just have a look. But then secondly, you can then use the drawing tools on LandApp to enhance your plan. And when we say enhance that plan, that can either be remove some existing features because either the buffer is, the wild edge that we're saying is going in the most productive area of the farm, or conversely, you want to put in more edges because the RPA's hedgerow data has missed it off. So I'm just going to walk through both of those scenarios and use this template to basically enhance my management plan, but having those wild edges as the focus to my plan. So let's say, for example, along this edge, there isn't a hedgerow, but there isn't a hedgerow according to the RPA, but actually on the ground, there is a really small hedgerow. There's a really faint hedgerow that just wasn't mapped with the RPA. So what you can do is you can add your own buffer feature by using our buffer tool. So first you draw your line, like so. Oh, he says, like so. Once you've got your line, you can then add a buffer to the inside of that line, and you can dictate what that feature is. So at the moment in our rule book, we're adding 3 meters of scrub either side of an existing hedge. So then your hedge goes 6 meters wide, and then 3 meters of margin either side of that. So let's just follow those rules for now. So it matches. It's just I want 3 meters, my hedge to go 3 meters in one direction. I'm going to round the corners and hit subtract, and I'm going to give it that purple code, which is the dense scrub. I want to encourage my hedgerow to go to that width. And then secondly, I want to draw another buffer to the other side of that existing scrub line. And instead, I want it to be my arable margin. Like so, 3 meters. Round the corners, subtract. And I'm now just building up that wild edge that maybe was missing. So I've got an arable margin. What type of arable margin to be decided? You could go, like I mentioned, the tussocky grasses, like a beetle bank, some of that cocksfoot, or you may want to go more delicate wildflowers and use it as a bit of a opportunity to get some more rotational options in. We don't want to be prescriptive here. What we want to do is encourage as many people to think about how they can improve their edges. So that's me adding a new wild edge. Other things that you might be interested to do, and I know, for example, there's other parts of this farm that could be, larger areas go down to scrub. So, for example, in this field, there's a bit of a camping, glamping site happening, but actually this whole area could be going down to wildflowers. And all we want to do is encourage people, like Hugh said, to try and get nearer that 20%. So I'm actually just going to add, alongside that wild edge, I want this whole area as well to go into flowers, pollen and nectar mix. And every time I'm adding this picture, my percentages are changing. And the way that you can visualize that is if you come into reports, go into add project for your project layers and choose your wild edges, you can start to see where you are in terms of percentage covers. So 100% of this holding is 130 acres. At the moment, in total, I've put 1.5 hectares in arable margin, 1.5%, sorry, about 2 hectares. And I've put in a total of 1% into scrub. So I'm still only, I've only used 2.5% is going into wild edges. So what we're hoping is you can start to use the land app to get that number increase. So we're not trying to be too prescriptive, but you want to reduce that number. And obviously in that management plan, there's a couple of key features that I'm missing. The woodlands, for example, if I just quickly added the woodlands onto my percentage, that's when you start to see the real numbers increase. But what we want to do is just provide you with the tool to create those buffers nice and quickly, have a look and visualize, where those edges could go, but also comment and, amend them if you don't think they're in the right place. The method that we're using to get rid of edges, even though the easiest option might seem like just clicking on one and deleting it, what I want to encourage you to do is not that. And the reason for it is as soon as I've deleted this polygon, I've lost data in this area. There's nothing I can click on. So in the guidance document, what we encourage you to do is instead merge the wild edge back with the field itself. So click on the field first, hold shift, select the 2 wild edged strips, the orange and the purple, and merge them back together. And then what you get is you've not lost the data that contains that area. If you do hit delete, you end up having gaps in the data set, and therefore your percentage is going to be off because you've just deleted the data itself rather than anything else. So that is, that's me doodling up the wild edges. And other things we are looking for as part of this pledge isn't just scrub habitat. It's where can you put wetlands, where can you potentially plant new woodland blocks, where could you do whole fields that might be unproductive. And so use this land management template to just paint a future vision for your farm. And again, this is a hypothetical vision, but just by doing this, you're going to start conversations with either your family members or your neighbors or your advisors about a future vision for your farm. And fundamentally, it's going to be these farms, as a collective, that deliver the local nature recovery, restoration, ecological restoration that we so desperately need. So I know, for example, on this farm, one thing that they are looking at is a wetland creation in this corner. So just hypothetically, I can add that to my percentage, draw my wetland, and just give it a wetland code. And then I can go and have a look at my percentages and see how they've changed. Now I've added my existing woodland. So I've added my existing woodland. Where have I got to now? So the figure is now, nearly 10% of this farm is in woodland. So that's getting towards that 20% of land shared. And I've also increased a couple of the other habitats. So the unassigned area is only 87%. So I'm now 12-13% of my farm. And by working with clients or yourselves or your families around, just understanding where there might be an opportunity to, improve those edge habitats, you're really going to make a difference in the long term, especially if we do this collective action. One final thing that I did want to cover, and one good little trick to improving connectivity, and I mentioned it if you were on the webinar yesterday, is that edge habitats don't have to just be a set meterage around the outside. You can chop off empty corners, and you can also make fields rectangle. So making fields rectangle can actually improve your efficiency. So driving tractors up and down in lines is a lot more efficient than trying to drive tractors around nitty edges. So just to show you how you can do that on the land app is you can hit draw, choose a rectangle, and then add that rectangle to the field like so. Ooh, where am I going? You could probably make it a bit neater. Once you've got that, you can then subtract the efficient rectangle and potentially put in the outside into a margin of sort as well. And that's obviously the slightly more extreme end of the spectrum, but that's just another tool that is quite a good way of rapidly building up that plan. As a note, at the moment I mentioned funding, we are having conversations with different people that might be interested in funding these, both public and private. However, there is one obvious way that if you are, wanting to get on and do some WildEdges now, that you can apply for, and that's countryside stewardship. So just to show you on the Land app, what you can do is you can duplicate your WildEdges. So you can click the 3 dots next to your WildEdges process, hit duplicate, and just transfer it into a countryside stewardship template like this. And what that does is that brings over all the shapes of all the features, but it doesn't actually carry over any of the attribution. So the colors have gone, but the shapes of the edges are there. And from here, you can then assign, those edges, the different codes that you might put into stewardship. So it might be that, all of the outer edges, all of the outer edge ones, like this one and this one, go into, say, I don't know, an AB8, and all of the, the grassland options over here go into an SW1 or 2. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones we want, but we've got a growing list of things that you can create. And then depending if you're going into higher or mid tier, there are some options for that's cultivated land. Which one is grassland strips? I don't know. I have to find it. SW adjacent to, that's adjacent to a watercourse, but hopefully that will then speed up your process of designing your stewardship, because instead of having to draw all the buffers, this algorithm will just automatically produce the buffers which you can assign to specific stewardship codes. Once you've done your land management plan, and this is very much not complete, but it's it's getting there. You're building up that future vision. It's not, you're not saying that you're definitely going to do it. It's just, this is what you could do. There's a couple of things that WildEast want to encourage you to do to understand where we are as a sector. And Land app's in a fortunate position where we've got more and more users to come in. So if you would like to pledge your data to WildEast, and this isn't for them to share publicly, and you can read their data statement. This is for them to understand what the sentiment is in the community to support an initiative like WildEast. There is some guidance for how you do that, but it's super simple. And I just want to talk you through the process now. Is once you've designed your plan, all you need to do is add as a collaborator using the sharing settings in the top right, add as a collaborator a special email address that's called mypledge@wildeast.co.uk, and change that permission to a publisher. And what this does when you add them as a viewer is this will send WildEast a notification, and they will then be able to come into your map, have a look at your pledge. And if they're happy, they're not going to change any data, but if they're happy with it to go onto into their dashboards for contributions, they will then be able to publish, which means extract that data to go into an automated dashboard through the publish button here. So they will come in and publish that data for you. It will take about 48 hours, but then your data will be able to be visible as part of this ever-growing community of how your percentages are contributing to the wider greater good. And then the final point is you own the data. This isn't data that WildEast owns or Land app owns. As our end user license agreement says, you own the data. So at any point you want to unpledge, you don't want anyone to see the data. It's just as quick as to undo it. And all you need to do is back into sharing settings and click that cross. Automatically WildEast can no longer see that map. So we're putting you completely in the driving seat of who sees your data. And that principle of pledging to WildEast is how we hopefully see future pledges or potentially future submissions to other schemes, whether that's a private funding scheme or a governmental application as well. So yeah, mypledge@wildeast.co.uk as a publisher. They will come in and then be able to publish it. And hopefully we can start to generate some reports on how many people are getting involved in the movement. Is it realistic to hit that 20%, and so on and so forth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan. And Andrew is also saying thanks. It's a great tool. Thank you very much for your feedback. And I think if there's not another sneaky question that comes in the next 10 seconds, we'll end the webinar there. So have a lovely end to the week, everyone, and a good weekend. And I'm sure we'll see you all in the future.